puppet show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with lies and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
I know the truth is hard to swallow, just digest it. Suspected something's going on. Chosen, just neglected. Deflected by some breaking news. How we just accepted. Expected just to fall in line and follow their perspective. Don't question their objectives, but I got a lot of questions. How these kids molested, but nobody's been arrested. Read it in the Testament. These children are protected. So I'm fighting all these terrorists, both foreign and domestic.
Hey, folks, welcome to Truth Talk with Steve. Today, I've got a gentleman joining us I'm very excited to talk to. He's got an amazing background. He's an author. We'll talk a little bit about his book and just the impact that's already having. You can see it in the background behind him. Magnetic Heart God, is that correct, Cory?
Yes, sir.
He's also a pastor, communicator, and tenacious pursuer of truth, which is one of the reasons I really was excited to have him on. So welcome to the show, Cory. Appreciate you being here.
Steve, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Well, before we really get started and get into this, tell us a little bit about your background, like how you grew up, what your experience was as a child and then as you grew into an adult and, what got you on the path that you're currently on.
Right. Well, I'm living in California now, but I'm originally a Canadian, born and bred, Alberta and British Columbia specifically. I grew up as a poor kid. Bouncing around. There was a while there where our family was homeless, while where we lived way up on a mountainside in a log cabin with no power, no running water, kind of a 1800s type lifestyle. I grew up with parents who loved me, but we were definitely on the low end of the social scale, the bottom of it. And I was one of those kids that grew up asking why. I wanted to know the question of why. You looking at the world around me, wondering why people are doing what they're doing, why we're saying what we're saying. I remember specifically with my dad listening to the radio. We had the radio on the kitchen table when the first Iraq War happened.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And this is in the mountains of British Columbia, and we'd sit around and just listen to what was taking place. And I remember thinking, what is the why behind all this? The why of what sent America in to start with, and the why of what was happening there. And I've just always I've been asking that question. And so as a child, even, I first started looking in philosophy. That was my thing. I got really big into Plato and Aristotle and Confucius, and looking to answer that question of why. And I think it's a question we're all asking. We look at the world today, and that's what we ultimately have to ask is why. I didn't find the answer in philosophy. And actually, looking back, I don't think you're supposed to find the answer in philosophy. In fact, philosophy asks more whys than it tries to answer, right?
Yeah.
Then I really got excited about psychology, right? And specifically for myself, I would have called myself a Freudian for a while.
Wow.
His whole idea of the development of personality. It's very interesting, and then of course he launches into his theories on the id and the ego and the superego and all those Freudian things. But truth is, you don't have to study Freud very long, and you realize this guy's kind of insane himself.
Exactly.
But came to realize that the answer to why, again, is not in psychology. It's like one of those evolving, what they say is true today, they discover is not true tomorrow, kind of scenarios. And then you turn to neuroscience. And it's like, well, neuroscience, again, is a fantastic study. In fact, I would say it's like what people are obsessed with today. And it's interesting, the neuroplasticity of the brain.
Yeah.
Right. And how your brain can really literally reshape through trauma or through self-discipline, both positive and negative. The influence of brain chemicals and dopamine and serotonin and the fascinating thing. And yet at the same time, what I've learned was that the study of philosophy or psychology or neuroscience, at the end of the day, that's the study of mechanism, not source. It does not answer the question of why. It's kind of like stepping into, the dominoes are falling, and you kind of step in halfway through. You can see the dominoes falling, and you can maybe even actually talk about physics and why they're falling and how they're falling. But what knocked them over to start with? What's the why, right? And those, philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, you don't find that answer there. Even though the world is still fiery bent to find the answer there, you won't find the answer there, which ultimately led me to the understanding to research the soul. And in my case, a journey of faith, right? And so really what I've been on in recent times has been on a mission to remind people simply this: more than a brain or a body, you are a soul.
That's awesome.
I would say that's not simply a religious statement. I would say that is a statement of fact. That is a statement that we could talk about and we could offer evidence to, scientifically and historically. And it's only been in recent years, in recent decades, that we seem to have forgotten that.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so the world is just like loud right now. It is hell bent on promoting and catering to the cravings of the body and the brain, the body and the brain, body and the brain. Right. It's every politician's promise. It's every content of every commercial, right? The body and the brain. Meanwhile, our souls are starving to death.
Amen.
And if we look at America, or we look at the world for that matter today, and we wonder why the chaos, that's why we have no desire to swim, right? We have sexual desire. Well, there's such a thing as sex. If there was never, ever such a thing as sex, that craving would not exist. We do not have cravings unless satisfaction for those cravings also exists. And yet, we as human beings have cravings that aren't merely biological cravings, right? We go beyond the animal kingdom in that sense. We crave justice.
Yeah.
We crave the distinction between a moral right and a moral wrong, right? Who's right, who's wrong? We crave identity. Again, there's no creature on earth but humanity that craves identity. And it is a huge craving. I often say identity asks 4 symbiotic questions. Who am I? Why am I? Do I have value? Do I have purpose? This is a huge question of the soul, a huge craving that we have. We crave eternity.
Yeah.
We even crave God. And these cravings would not exist
if there was no such
thing. If there was no such thing as satisfaction, if that was not reality, right? So I always say you're your own best evidence that you have a soul. And second,
well put and simple,
Yeah. And secondary, listen, think about this. Every culture that we've ever known about, I always call it the evidence of uncoerced conclusion. Every culture came to this same conclusion independently. That is to say that the Europeans who believed in a soul, when they landed at Plymouth Rock and came to America, they came to, the American natives who already believed in the soul.
Yeah.
The Europeans did not bring the knowledge of the soul. They brought a religion, but they did not bring an awareness of the soul. It already existed, right? When the Romans who believed in the soul landed their legions north of the White Cliffs of Dover, they landed and tried to conquer the Britons, but the Britons already believed in the soul. Again, they brought religion, but they did not bring an awareness of the soul. Long before Africa was ever subject to outside conquest or influence, they believed in a soul. So when you think that every culture, without exception, came to the same conclusion independently, like that's as scientific a fact as you can get. That's the very definition of science.
Yeah,
right?
No doubt.
Right. I often say if I'm sitting in the living room and my son comes running in and he says, "Dad, did you hear that loud bang?" And I say, "No, I didn't hear it. I wonder if he's hearing things," right? But then my wife comes in from the garden and she's like, "Oh, did you hear that bang?" It's like, two testimonies. They were not connected. Yeah. Maybe there was a bang. And then the neighbor phones and he's like, "Did you guys hear that bang?" It's like, okay, I didn't hear it, but there was a bang. You amplify that analogy by thousands of times, right? And you say, mathematically, scientifically, historically, we have a soul. And it has only been in the modern generation that intuitive awareness has been educated out of us.
Yeah, that's wow. I mean, you just really define that and outline that very well. Appreciate that. What is your personal opinion? And there's obviously a lot of answers that go with this, a lot of different issues that contribute to this, in my belief, at least. What got us here? What's happened?
As in humanity, why do we exist?
Yeah, overall, what's your take on, how did we get to where we got so wrapped up in life that we've forgotten who, not only who we are, haven't asked who we are, and basically focus on the things that don't matter, honestly.
That I'm going to answer this question in a strange way, perhaps. Maybe this will offend some of your listeners, but
hey, we talk truth here. So
I heard Tucker Carlson
I
heard Tucker Carlson on a podcast with Theo Vaughn a couple weeks ago, and he said something that was interesting. Whether he's right or wrong, I don't know, but it was interesting. They were specifically talking about architecture and how ancient, like old architecture, actually, like not that old, actually, 100 years ago and further back, before World War II, was beautiful.
Oh yeah,
we made things that were gorgeous, even like the train stations in Calcutta, like this kind of poverty. They're like these works of art.
Yeah,
glorious. And this is Tucker Carlson's theory, and it's fascinating. He says, when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, we got a God complex. And we suddenly thought, we are God. There is none other. It is simply me in this flesh as I stand here. I have this power. And of course, he's talking about how architecture took a nosedive at that point.
Right.
It was funny because he said there's nothing more oppressive than drop ceilings and fluorescent lighting. And I'm like, preach it. Because I tend to agree with that. But we went like, architecture is not beautiful anymore. Human life doesn't matter anymore. At least your life doesn't matter. It's all about me because I'm God. And we've deluded ourselves. We're now walking around as average citizens in the delusion of our own power and our own autonomy. And I believe at the end of the day, that is how we got to where we are today. We're just even the average person on the street has a God complex.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's interesting take. Yeah, there's no doubt. So when did you get, involved in, what had you step into becoming a pastor, and how's that experience been, and where are you at in that stage of your life? Yeah.
Well, I've been a pastor for about 12 years now.
Cool.
I really got into it because before that I was a musician, and then I would do music for church, and then different churches would kind of hire me to kind of travel around and do music for them. And then at that particular case, for myself, I got excited about God, and they couldn't shut me up between songs. so one pastor told me to preach one day, and I found my calling, kind of thing. So I had stepped into it from there. Cool. And then, of course, that whole thing has led me on a journey of unfortunately, we do not live in a world or even a nation where we have a synchronized understanding of truth. Whether or not it's the Christian truth, which is what I would subscribe to, or Islam or Buddhism and Hinduism, for all that matter, who are less focused on truth to start with. But and so, being as a Christian, of course, there's a whole lot of study to say, okay, what is the actual truth of this? We're saying a lot of things, we're claiming a lot of things, but what is the truth of it, right? And ultimately, so for my history, my background of asking that question of why, and searching for it in philosophy and psychology and neuroscience, and ultimately ending up in faith, where I believe I found the answer to why. I found the source. I know what's happening now, right? Or at least what knocked over, right? The whole crescendo that took place after that. So that was kind of my journey to get to the point where I am right now. Right now, I'm on a huge mission to remind people about, regardless of their faith background, regardless of what their particular vision at this moment of what God is or what source is, I want to remind people, you are a soul. More than a brain or a body, you are a soul. That is the beginning point of finding wisdom. That is the beginning point of finding purpose and discovering, why this is all happening.
I love that, because honestly, I can't think of right now, but my memory's not the greatest these days. I honestly can't think right now anyone I've come across that is focused on that. And I think that's
well, and not only that, in faith, or even in the world for that matter, we talk about the soul all the time. I mean, in the world, we talk about the Olympics is going to come up, the Paris Olympics this summer, right? And there's going to be all sorts of talk about the indomitable human spirit, right? Things like that. They're talking about the soul. Or oftentimes people will say, follow your heart. What does your heart tell you? They're talking about the soul, right? They're talking about the core. And then in actual faith, we talk about the soul, we preach about the soul, we sing about the soul, but we leave it ambiguous.
So true.
It's kind of like Star Wars. They talk about the Force, right? And it's just kind of this ambiguous thing. That's the way we look at the soul. And I believe that the soul can be defined, and not only that, but the soul can be understood. And that is really the whole point of my book. If you want to understand yourself, if you want to understand your spouse, your neighbor, if you want to understand that politician you hate and that politician you love, you need to go below neuroscience, deeper than psychology, deeper than philosophy, and look at the soul. And that's why my book is called The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the Five Cravings of Your Soul. It's a deep dive into who we are as people and what it is we're looking for.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited. I'm going to order it today. It got me curious now. I really want to dig into that. So as you went down these past 12 years of that path of becoming a pastor, and you feel like you answered the questions, what conclusions have you come to?
Right. Well, ultimately, I believe that, as I mentioned, as in the title of the book, The Five Cravings of Our Soul, that there are five fundamental human cravings, again, as I said before, that are deeper than psychology. So I say they are of the soul. And for people who have struggled with the word the soul, I'll often say our non-biological selves, if it helps people to be able to understand it, right? We have five core cravings that are at the root of all human movement. They are the source of all human ambition. We can understand everybody from every culture, from every generation and gender throughout life and time by examining these five core cravings. And that is what the book breaks down. Yeah. So the first one obviously I go in depth into the book. Right. But to start with, the first one is, you'd be able to guess it, it's security.
Yep.
Every human being who ever existed has a soul craving deep rooted for security. And I break security into two parts. We have physical security, which we would talk about our survival instinct, right? And then we have relational security. And that is to say, we need to know that our hearts are safe in the hands of those who hold them. And we can have all the physical security we want, but if we don't have relational security, it can literally drive us to madness, right? So we have within us this craving for security that is deeper than psychology, right? It is deep, deep rooted inside of us.
Would you say that's similar to, or the same as the craving to be loved?
Yeah, I would say, well, at the end, I would say that love is kind of what we are looking for in love is these five cravings.
Gotcha.
Right. And when we think we love someone, it's because we feel that these five cravings are satisfied in that person.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So first one is security. And these aren't ranked in order of like priority. They're just kind of second one is identity. As I mentioned, those four symbiotic questions. Who am I? Why am I? Do I have value? Do I have purpose? Fascinating thing. I often say that the world is laced with the paths of rich and educated multitudes, all searching for meaning and purpose. Right? That is, I get asked that question so often. How do I find purpose? How do I find meaning? Well, first off, you're not going to find it in a career. You're going to find it when you understand your soul, right? But we have this craving for identity, and the world is loud with it right now.
That's where, that's where, to me, we're so lost in a way, because if you're looking at entrepreneurship, business, whatever, they're all talking about find your purpose, find your, the way you just put it,
Well, it's racial identity, economic identity, sexual identity. Like identity is our obsession right now. And just think of it, like when you look at the world and you think about science, we will look at, say, a giraffe, and we'll say, oh, look, the purpose and the meaning of a giraffe is to, like, they can get the high leaves that no one else can get, right? And then we'll be able to identify them in that way. And then we'll say, okay, the purpose of a lion is to thin down the sick and the aged from the herds to keep healthy herds, right? And then the purpose of the ant and the beetle, when that lion dies, is to, like, kind of help it decompose and get in the soil and grow. We can look at everything, every beast on earth, and say, I see their purpose, I see the meaning. We look at ourselves and we're lost. Right. And so we're just looking for an identity. And of course, that's the interesting part is, I think that's the reason why politics has become so hostile, because we've made it an identity issue.
Oh,
and
so true.
Once you've made something an identity issue, it's the core of who you are. I often say that identity feels like home, and you will fight to protect your home. And that's why in politics, we can't have a conversation anymore, because it's like, I can't just come to you and say, hey, this is a good idea. Even though we're on different sides of the aisle or whatever, what do you think about this idea? No, we shun it immediately because it's an identity issue, right? And we should never have made politics about identity, but we did.
Right.
Anyway, I digress. Security, identity, independence
It's number
is the number 3. And again, I break independence into 2 parts. There's the cry for freedom, right? We need to have some sort of autonomy. And if someone threatens that, right, again, we will fight to protect that autonomy. And that's why prison itself, like being thrown in jail, is a punishment in and of itself, right? Because that physical freedom, even that intellectual freedom is taken away or confined. So we're all craving that freedom aspect of independence, but we're also craving individuality. We need to know that we're distinct. And this is even true of those identical twins that, for a while they love to have the same haircuts and wear the same clothes, right? Talk at the same time kind of thing. But at some point, they will come to the point where they need something that sets them apart as distinct, right? Maybe they're the athletic twin or the intellectual twin or whatever it is. Otherwise, we feel redundant and useless and purposeless and unseen, right?
Yep.
So we're craving security, identity, independence. Third, significance. We all need to feel like we are special, not just distinct, but special in some way, right? And I often think like Usain Bolt, fastest man who's ever run as far as we know in the world. At some point, his record's going to fall.
Exactly.
Right? not only is he going to have an identity issue, right? But that thing that he's found his significance in for so long is going to collapse, and he's going to have to find something else. So for Usain Bolt, maybe I'm the fastest man on earth. For grandma, she makes the best apple pie, right?
Yeah.
For me, well, no one can sharpen a pencil like I can, or whatever it is. We have to have something where we feel we are above, we are special. It's ingrained in each of us.
That is so true. Not to shift away from what we're talking about. We'll wrap up, but some of my audience knows some of my story. I have a podcast. I stopped doing it so I could really focus on this one, but I'd done it for 3 years, and it was called Life After Addiction and Indictment. So I was addicted to opiates for 14 years after being diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and that's a story of its own. And then my appraisal firm, the appraisal firm and then myself got thrown into a big mortgage fraud case that became a federal case that I got indicted on and went to prison over. And the reason I bring that up is because the things you're talking about, I've experienced, man, they just hit so hard at home to me, because when I came out, I'd lost my confidence. I couldn't do what I used to do. So who was I? That identity was gone. And I remember my father, he was a dentist and he retired. And a few years later, we were talking and he was explaining to me how it's been really difficult on him because he wasn't Dr. Cloward anymore. He said he felt like he lost his identity. That didn't make sense to me until I went through what I went through. And damn, I'll tell you what, we placed so much on that, and for so long, it's been 12, 13 years since I got out of federal prison. And for about 8 of those years, I was just stuck. And I was, it was my fault, nobody else's. I was somewhat as a victim. But frankly, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and the things I was doing, I wasn't attaching myself to, because it seems like our identity is so often attached to what we do professionally, and some of the things I was doing, I made a good living and stuff, but I wasn't ever willing to define myself by it because I wasn't proud of it. It didn't do anything to fulfill me. Anyway, I don't know why I went off on that, but because it just really hit home when you were talking about some of those things, because man, I experienced it to the core, and it was really frustrating and difficult.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that personal testimony. And I'm sure that each of your listeners will be able to identify. I mean, these are the cravings that best define us.
Yeah.
Right. So we have security, identity, independence, significance, and then fifth, but second to none, innocence.
Wow.
We all need to know that we are good boys and girls. In fact, think about this. Basically, every argument you've ever had happened, or any offense you've ever taken happened because you felt that someone, either boldly or inadvertently accused you of wrongdoing or wrong thinking.
Yep.
They pressed that innocence button on you. They threatened your innocence Maybe it was something simple as you left the socks on the floor again, honey. Right.
Yeah.
And what happens? Rather than humbly picking up your socks and apologizing, we're like, whoa, you left your shirt on the floor. Right.
Exactly. So true.
Basically, all friction in society, or a huge amount of it, is based on the innocence craving, where we feel like someone has accused us of wrongdoing or wrong thinking. And so we have a choice. We either have to run away because we can't be around someone who makes us feel guilty. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we have to fight.
Yep.
And we get into what I often call the righteousness, righteousness wars. I don't need to feel totally innocent. I just need to feel less guilty than you. Right. And so the fight begins. Right. And that's at the root of cancel culture. Innocence and significance, I would say, are at the root of cancel culture, as we fight for, I'm the special one, or I'm the righteous one. Right. And so when we look at all human activity, security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence, we can look at the world and we can say, wow, there's a whole lot of problems here, and there's all sorts of thousands and thousands of ways to dissect it. But I can tell you, at the root of all of it are those 5 cravings. And it's so helpful because you can finally know what you're looking for. You wonder, why won't my sister talk to me? Maybe there's a lot of, there's a whole mountain, of things to consider, but I can tell you what the root of it is: security, identity, independence, significance, or innocence.
It's so fascinating, but it makes so much sense. I mean, it totally resonates with me.
Right. Yeah. And you think, why did my neighbor leave her spouse? Again, they're going to give accusations back and forth, have all these things. At the root of it: security, identity, independence, significance, or innocence. That's why we enter into a relationship. Love, as you mentioned, right? We're hoping to find a satisfaction for these 5 cravings. Ultimately, that's why we leave, because we feel we didn't find it there. So we have to go out and search it in something else, right? For one person, they're going to find these things in weightlifting, right? For a while, I was heavy into weightlifting, and I am a little bit. But you go and there's those gym rats, and they look at the world and they judge everybody, all their significance and all their value and all their identity by how much can you bench press, how much can you squat. Meanwhile, the next guy doesn't even think about that. For him, it's about academics. Do you have a PhD? Right? What's your grade point average? Right? That's the way they measure the world. But both of those guys are looking for the same thing. They're looking to satisfy the same craving. They're just looking in different places.
So this seems so significant to me. So I got to ask you this question. I have my beliefs. Obviously, through education experience, we learn things and come up with things. How long has your book been out, number one? And then do you feel that you had divine help writing it and coming up with what you've just talked about?
Yeah. So the book is just coming out now. And yes, as far as your last question goes, I mean, I don't talk about it too much because it feels weird and I don't want to freak people out. But it's one of those things where I'm not claiming to be some sort of prophet or something at all. But it's one of those things where I feel like I could not write this book. I had to write it. And when I was writing it, I knew that I was writing something that was fresh and new, but at the same time, it's not a new thing. It's just a new realization. It's a new awareness that we've come to. And I also knew I was writing something that was beyond me. Right? I just had this feeling like, wow, it's like, to a certain degree, it's like that guy who's digging a hole and comes across gold. You can credit him for digging the hole in the right place, but ultimately there's gold there and he had nothing to do with that. Right. And so to a certain degree, I feel like that's the scenario with the book. And I've had it where, obviously, as I mentioned, I'm a person of faith. So I call the book is called The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul, because at the end of the day, these are non-biological cravings, remember.
Yep.
They are not psychological cravings. They are in the soul. They are non-biological cravings, which means they cannot be satisfied in biological things.
Yep.
Now, I believe that biological things can kind of reflect sustenance to us, right? But ultimately, they cannot be the satisfying source.
Are you tired of paying exorbitant monthly fees for your in-home entertainment? Do you wish there was a way to bring quality and affordable entertainment right into your household without a monthly subscription? Well, look no further. Introducing the 𝑉C Box Android TV Stream Box. Since 2020, 𝑉C Box has been enriching people's lives all over the world, and now it's coming to North America. Say goodbye to scattered subscriptions and countless apps. We've got all your streaming in one place. This is the best fully loaded Android TV box provider in North America. Our user-friendly interface makes navigation a breeze, and with the voice remote featuring Google Assistant, finding your entertainment has never been easier. The 𝑉CBox V2 Pro Android box is the epitome of convenience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your favorite shows and movies with just a few simple voice commands. And the best part, no monthly subscriptions. That's right, you heard it correctly. Say goodbye to those pesky recurring fees and hello to endless entertainment. Join the 𝑉CBox revolution and elevate your entertainment experience. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Visit our website and order your 𝑉CBox now. Bring home the 𝑉CBox today and bring endless joy and excitement to your household. 𝑉CBox, unleash the power of entertainment.
Right. So it's like a classic example. I heard an interview with Elon Musk a while ago, and the interviewer asked him, richest man in the world, right? As far as we know, the richest man who's ever existed.
The planet, yeah.
The interviewer asks him, are you happy? And Elon pauses for a moment and he thinks. And then he says, and he kind of says it in broken English, like you could tell it's really impacting him. He says, I don't think many people would want to be me. You know, here's a man who has,
we all look at it.
From a biological sense, everything. Right. And yet he can't find happiness. And that's not an isolated thing. That is the rule. That is all these people who, they make it big as an actor, right? Suddenly they have fame, they have money, they have influence, they have sex, they have, everything they ever thought they wanted. Are they happy? No.
Dude, right? Man, that is so true. And we continue to taste that crap.
Yeah. And then for the rest of us, exactly. You just hit it right on the nail. We are so unimaginative, right? So we think, okay, I need to fill this hole inside. I need to have the satisfaction. So we look in all the same places every time, right? We're going to look in wealth. We're going to look in power and control, right? We're going to look in influence or sex, right? Or some such thing as that. We're going to look in intellect. We're going to look at the guy who is so self-disciplined. He's got big abs, right? Because he's self-disciplined. But here's the problem. We get there and it's never enough. We need more. So what do? Rather than saying, okay, I didn't find it there, we say, you know what? I got $1 million. It didn't make me happy. Clearly I need 2 million. Right.
So true.
Or I became, I have my dream came true. I became, a lawyer, and I'm a really good lawyer. And pretty soon it's like, that's not enough. Now I need to become president of the United States. Right? And it's like, it's never enough. But we keep looking to satisfy a non-biological craving in biological things.
Dude, that is so right on. Right. I mean, it's the same thing. Oh, you get this craving. I used to be really horrible at this. When I would call it, I got an itch. And once I knew what the itch was, I was going to go solve it right now. If that was buying a brand new truck, if that was going getting a Rolex, if it was going and buying all this bullshit, excuse me. Yeah. I was so, because I thought that was going to make me feel better. And frankly, I thought some of those things were actually defining me. Those are some of the things that I learned by going through what I went through. And which is why I'm so grateful, that I went through that stuff, because, as you talked about, we chased those things. That's who I was. It was all about money and stuff for recognition, defining me to others, and then as I come out of prison, I've lost everything except for what matters. I didn't lose my family, thank the good Lord. And I can tell you for that next 2 to 3 years, because I didn't have a bunch of bills or debt weighing me down. The peace that I had in that time, and frankly, the happiness was more valuable than any of the other stuff in times of my life, period. It is, I mean, dude, you are so onto this. This is just blowing me away, because that's why I asked, because I felt there's divine intervention here with what he's talking about, because I've just never heard anyone talk like this at all. And yet it's so simple. It makes so much sense.
Well, as I mentioned, it's a brand new concept that has been here forever.
Right.
Once your eyes are open to it, it's like, I see it everywhere, and it's always been here. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like truth, when you finally see truth. It's like you cannot see some of these things.
Yeah. But then here comes the thing. Knowledge, essentially is awareness. When you gain a new knowledge, it means you've gained a new awareness. So what people, what people can learn through this is they can have that new awareness. However, wisdom is then the correct application of that new awareness.
Bingo.
Right. So knowledge is going to look at the sky and say, oh, by the wind and the clouds and what the birds are doing, it is going to be windy tonight and it's going to rain.
Yeah. That's
what knowledge does. Wisdom says, okay, I got to bring in a lawn furniture. Right. I better put a tarp over that sand because I don't want it to get wet.
Yeah.
Right. And so for all of us, we get this information. We become enlightened to the awareness of our soul. Yeah. Now we have to exercise wisdom. We have to do something about it. Because the problem is that most of us, and I can say, I mean, myself as the concept pioneer of this whole thing, I still struggle with this every day, is to say, I want to be Elon Musk. I want to have what he has. And yet to know I can get it and I won't have peace.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's another thing. We live in a world where we don't define terms properly anymore. Like the whole world is looking for peace and happiness. But what are peace and happiness?
Exactly.
We either leave them ambiguous, so we literally don't know what we're looking for, right? Or we think we can define them for ourselves, which doesn't work. I'll tell you exactly what peace requires. Peace is security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence, all satisfied at the same time.
Wow.
And that's why our moments of peace are so fleeting.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can feel totally secure in who I am and that I'm loved. I can know who I am. Right. But if someone's making me feel guilty, I'm not at peace. Right. Or I can feel righteous and I can feel so special. But if someone's trying to break into my home, I'm not at peace. All 5 cravings have to be satisfied at the same time. And there's nothing on earth that can give that to you for any lasting measure. You can have moments.
Right.
Right. But then sooner or later, it all falls apart or it feels threatened and you lose that peace. And that's why I call the book The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul. Because ultimately, I believe that at the end of the day, we can only experience these things in any lasting measure when we connect them with our maker, when we come to that point of spiritual awareness, right? And again, don't get me wrong, we can experience reflections of these things in the world around us, and we should.
Right.
So as an example, if you want your wife to never leave you, be a person that reflects to her security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence, right? Yep. If you want to climb the corporate ladder at work, have them look at you and say, hey, there's a guy who helps us feel secure, identity. You go through those things. And if you want to lose that job or have those people walk away, threaten one of those things. Yep. And eventually it will happen, right? So it does have, absolutely, I want to be a man. I want to be a citizen. I want to be a pastor. I want to be who reflects, and soothes these cravings in other people. But I got to realize I cannot be the source.
Right.
If someone is looking to me to be the source, I will let them down. They're putting a burden on me that I cannot possibly bear.
Well, I think that's where we've gone wrong in society too, is particularly even right now with what's going on in the world, depending on what your views are. Yeah. It's like we think there's the magic bullet. Yeah. And there isn't such a thing. Yeah. Nothing is going to save us, because I was stuck in that for that 8 years after prison. I thought if I just hired the right manager to manage the business I had, then man, everything will be good, again. Yeah. But no, man, until I did an honest self-reflection and just said, hey, no one's coming to save me. I can go to as many masterminds and buy as many courses and get coaches, which are all great, but none of those people or things is going to solve the things that I'm fighting. Right. Only I am.
But then, of course, we're confronted. The reason it's so hard to remember is we're confronted with the big lie every day. The government says, I will satisfy your cravings, right? the Ford truck, on the TV commercials suggest, I will satisfy your craving, right? It goes on and on and on. There's all these people saying, I will do this for you, especially if you pay me or vote for me or support me.
No doubt about it.
The truth is, it's just a wet shirt. It's not going to work, right? Yeah. At the end of the day. And so in writing my book, as I mentioned, I'm a person of faith. And so I reach faith conclusions, but I've had atheists and people from many other faiths read the book, and I've heard have several of them tell me where I'm not completely ready to agree with you on your faith conclusions. Just coming to the awareness of the soul and myself, it changes the way I look at the world. Right.
That's huge. And that's, when we were talking before we started recording, you talked about what you saw, maybe you kind of getting involved in more so than pastoring and whatnot, meaning speaking. And I mean, as I've listened to you and got a little bit more understanding of what's in this book and, what you're talking about, because you need to be out there spreading this message, brother. I mean,
because the application is everywhere.
Yeah.
From parenting, right? I've talked to parenting groups before, and I'm always saying, hey, we have this tendency to want to offer security to our kids. Good. That's the core craving. But let's not forget to help them pursue identity and independence and significance and innocence in a healthy way.
Yes.
Right? All the way to businesses, how to grow a business, how to get a clientele. Like it's who we are. It's what we're looking for. And so it has application in literally every single scenario.
Man. Yeah. So anyway, kudos to you. Cause I don't know. I just have this feeling that, you need to be out there because this message brings so much value to what we need right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And that is my intent. And later 2024 will be to get out there and start speaking, like I said, in houses of worship and universities and, different clubs, different people, wherever people want to have a workshop or to hear deeper about these cravings and what makes us tick.
That's awesome. That's cool. Did you grow up with siblings?
I did. One brother, one sister. Yep. Yeah.
Very
that's
cool.
That's why I can ask that question. Why won't my sister talk to me?
Okay, gotcha. You experienced that. I understand how that works too. Very cool.
And I know in that particular case, it was because of significance. I was always tearing her down. I was like, I get it. I got it. But that's the beauty of it though, too, right? I mean, it boils it down to a digestible, bite. Where I can look and I can say, okay, like whether maybe people are out there and they're struggling in their marriage right now. It's revolutionary for couples to realize,
geez,
this is why, right? It's like, I'm like, I make money, I just shower her with money. I let her do whatever she wants. Why is she unhappy? Well, maybe it's because you're always accusing her and making her feel guilty, right? Or vice versa, right? It's like, it's like I said, it has application in every single scenario because these are the 5 cravings that have propelled all of humanity throughout life and time.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, obviously reading your book and understanding these 5 things is huge. For that for people that are looking for a way to, connect, I guess, maybe that's not the right word, but maybe it is, to their soul, to I guess I would call it, the way I would personally would call it is to increase my spirituality, but really the connection to God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any insights or input on that?
I do. And the first one would be, so whenever I speak on podcasts and radio shows and television interviews all across the world. And I'm very conscious of, and I would want your listeners to know this, though I am a person of faith, I do not do what I'm doing right now. Come on these shows to try to convince you, to convert you, right? That's not my goal. Ultimately, I have a belief system that I think I've tested and tried, and I believe it's the right one, but I want to allow people to go on their journey. So to answer your question is this, the first step, I believe, is first off, waking up to the realization, which you already know, you are a soul, right? More than a brain. Don't get me wrong. You're still a brain in the body. As long as we're here on earth, it's all connected, right? But the core of who you are, your personality, your deepest ambitions and motivations, you are a soul, right? When just in realizing that, it changes everything. Then when you add to that, I now know what my soul is looking for, right? And you can finally name what you're looking for, right?
That's a big deal.
To me, at that point, I would say to people, that is where you have to go on your adventure.
Yeah.
Right. And I have my opinions and my beliefs on where I hope you end up, just like a lot of people do. But now you need to go on your adventure. What I can tell you is you can get all the money in the world. It's not going to satisfy it.
Exactly.
Right. You can have all the sex in the world. You can get all the power in the world. It's not going to make you happy.
Exactly.
Most of us are going to have to go out there and experience it for ourselves. We're going to have to experience that pain and disappointment. I wish people wouldn't. I wish they could just hear what I'm saying and say, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. But most people are going to go try it, right?
Yep.
But then ultimately what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find that place where those 5 cravings are met simultaneously at the same time, right? And that is a big ask, because there's nothing on earth that can give that to you. Right. There's nothing biological, I should say, that can give that to you. So you're going to have to go on your spiritual journey and find out where. Obviously, I have my personal beliefs and my ideas where, and of course I dissect that in the book as well. Cool. But ultimately, I want to release people to go on that adventure, and that's what you're looking for. And so now that you know what you're looking for, you at least have a chance of finding it.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as it was just ambiguous and all you're doing is following your heart, you just wander the globe and are never satisfied for any significant length of time.
Right. Yeah. I was being a little bit selfish asking my question, because that's the journey I've been on, and I've seen a lot of improvements, certainly. But I can see the next step for me is digging into that book and really understanding these 5 things and just doing that work, like you say.
Well, in my book, like I said, I walk those parallel lines of philosophy and psychology and neuroscience and faith. And I start off, chapter 2 is called The Deep Why. And so for several chapters, we look at the why, what is happening. We dissect the 5 cravings. Just several chapters dedicated each one. There's the innocence chapter, there's a significance chapter, and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But then as we get to the end of it, then I move into the chapter, The Deep How. Right. Yeah. And that's where I turn a little bit more towards the faith aspect of things. But ultimately, that's what we need to get to. Right. Because it's one thing to say, I know that I need this. But again, that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Knowledge and wisdom. Yep.
Yeah. You have the awareness. Now you have to do the right thing with that awareness.
Yeah, that's great. And that's, and I respect the way you've kind of approached things on the faith, but at the same time, I think we need to speak our truths. That doesn't mean, and I appreciate the fact that you're making clear that doesn't mean the listeners have to agree or and that's the way it should be. Yeah. And we should be able to have those conversations regardless of the difference of opinions. And you hit on that earlier. That's, some of these things are missing, and that's why we have all this division taking place and whatnot. And we've got to get back to being frank. To me, it's just basics, just being civil. There's nothing wrong with having different opinions. We don't have to scream and yell at each other, and so, yeah, dude, I think I can see this book's going to have a huge impact. And so I'm just grateful we came across paths, because I'm excited to get into it myself. Because, I was one of those guys in school that I hated school, I don't know if it was, and it's not because I have an IQ like some people that's really high and so you're bored. That wasn't it. It's just nothing interested me that they were teaching, frankly. And my mind was always elsewhere, trying to think of things I could be doing and whatnot. But as I've started my awakening the last several years, when you find something that you're interested in, it takes away that, whatever word you want to use, work or a lot of effort. There's no effort, because I enjoy trying to find the truths and to learn about our true history and et cetera, et cetera. And from a standpoint of, different religions, but particularly the one I'm the most familiar with, there is a lot of shame and guilt for not thinking or doing things a certain way, which to me is just so backwards, Yeah. And,
well, and that's why I think that, so when I talk to people of different faiths, and specifically, people of the Christian faith, right? I will often kind of, so as a pastor, sometimes I have to reprimand people, specifically, and I'll often point out that even in the scenarios of faith, right, there's a lot of people who have come to approach their maker or approach God, and they look to him as some sort of celestial sugar daddy, right?
Yeah.
And so rather than bringing their cravings, to their maker, and having that spiritual satisfaction, which is a journey and an adventure all in of itself, what they do, and this is why so many faiths have been abusive, to be perfectly honest, right? or so many individual churches have become that way, is we look to God and we say, God, now that I, quote, believe in you, or whatever, whatever that is, I now expect you to fulfill my cravings in all these other. So essentially we're still looking to fulfill our cravings in a new truck and in a new job and in good health. Only now we're asking God to give us that new truck, to protect that job, to maintain our health, right? We're looking at the same stupid places that won't work, right? And now we're just trying to use God as an excuse to make that happen. And that's when that happens, that's when the power dynamics in churches really begin to grow, and abuses and deceptions can really begin to flourish. Yeah. And so my goal as a pastor, to be honest, is to come into those environments as well and try to dismantle that.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, so what's next for you besides getting out there and sharing the message that you do have?
Well, that really is what's next for me, is kind of stepping out. I did not expect this to happen when I wrote the book, but more and more it's become clear. I kind of thought I would write the book, it would go out there and I keep along doing my thing, right? But it's kind of become clear to me that no, this is going to change kind of my life trajectory, and that there is a hunger to hear about this. And so I want to go out there and share it, not just with people of faith, but as I mentioned, with people, whatever their belief background is. And let's talk about that starting point, at least, right? You're a soul, and you're a soul looking for this, right? Even if I can help people launch them off on their journey from that point, right? I feel like that will be a beneficial and a meaningful thing to do.
I'll say that's fantastic. Well, man, I sure appreciate your time and having you on. This is, I wasn't sure what we were going to discuss and how it would go, but man, to me, this has been one of the better podcasts, at least personally, because this is just something I'm so, focused on the last several months. And so I appreciate it. Appreciate your insights. And man, I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure, and absolutely anytime.
Awesome. Where can people find you and connect with you, Cory?
Yeah. The most simple way is go to CoryRosenke.com. I have a kind of a list of a few places where you can get the book from there, but ultimately the book will be available everywhere. If you can't remember Cory Rosenke, which sometimes I wish my name was John Smith, because that's easy to remember at least. But the Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul, whatever, just type that into whatever browser you're using and the book will pop up. If you go to my website, though, you can learn more about me. You can even contact me directly. If people are interested in hearing more, or in having the speaker speak to their group or whatever like that, that's definitely the centralized place, is CoryRosenke.com. Cool.
And I'll have that in the show notes, folks, so that you don't have to worry about it or wonder if you're spelling anything right. So just look in the show notes. We'll have all that for you. And I'll get a link that goes right there, as well as, to your book, etc. So, man, well, thank you again so much. Do you have any final words before we wrap it up?
My final words would simply be this: you are not the reflection looking back at you in the mirror. You're not the number on the weight scale. You're not the diploma on your wall. You're not the balance in your bank account. You are so much more than that. And the moment that we can authentically realize that, not in some sort of gaudy kind of like, oh, me, I'm a champion, puffed up kind of way, but when you understand, no, you are a soul that is valuable, a soul with deep longing. There is such depth and significance to you, far beyond what you've ever imagined. If people can begin to grasp that, right, that is the start of something beautiful. That is the start of finding purpose.
That's beautiful. Excellent. Well, it's a perfect way to end it. So again, thanks for your time, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, take care.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow, towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99, or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.